Hi there. Just catching up on a little reading, Modern Political Thought. This was a very important book in the formation of my education. My second year at college, took an honors political science class, and this is one of our major textbooks. I learned a lot about a lot of philosophers I didn't know too much about. Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, John Stuart Mill. There was one, though, that caught my eye right off the bat. One that I thought I knew a lot about, but maybe not quite as much as I thought. Niccolo Machiavelli. Most people probably heard the name. He wrote The Prince. You may not know the book, but in the early 16th century, he produced The Prince, which is a book that explains how one man should rule in a very brutal and dictatorial fashion. To be Machiavellian, an adjective naturally from Machiavelli's name, means to be brutal, to be underhanded, to rule by any means necessary, to be feared rather than respected. And so The Prince has been Niccolo Machiavelli's legacy ever since. It's how people remember him. They even gave him the adjective. But it turns out that might not be as fair as we think. Yes, Machiavelli wrote The Prince. Yes, many have taken it to heart as a dictatorial sort of work. However, it's not all that he wrote. I mean, Machiavelli was from Italy during the Renaissance. Very brutal time. A lot of rulers changing hands, a lot of wars going on. And so he sort of explained how that sort of thing works. But it's not the only work he wrote. He also wrote discourses. What's discourses, you ask? Well, it's a book that's much longer than The Prince, considerably for that matter. And it's a long, long praise of Republican, democratic government. There is some crossover thoughts between the two works, but they are much different. So, how does someone who wrote The Prince, a book about brutal, single-man rule, also write a well-worded, well-thought-out argument for Republican, democratic government? It's an excellent question, and one that might make you rethink Machiavelli. I guess there's really two answers to this question. One is that he believed both things. He believed that The Prince, if you're going to be a one-man ruler, you better be a brutal one. You better take control. But he also believed that Republican governments were better, that they were a better way for the people to live, for the rulers to live, for everybody. So there's that explanation, that he actually believed what he wrote down in both books. But their contradictions are because about contradictory types of government. Of course, there's another interpretation, and one that's caught on in popularity in recent years especially. And that is that he wrote The Prince sarcastically. Yes, he wrote this book about brutal one-man rule sarcastically, pointing out how bad brutal one-man rule actually was. Sort of like Socrates in the Apology, where he's talking about what a fool he is, really being sarcastic. And maybe that's what Machiavelli was doing here, being sarcastic about how one-man rule should work and how it doesn't work, ultimately. How being feared is the kind of thing that's going to get you dethroned, but it's the only way to do it. Discourses is a much different work. Thought out, well written, very interesting. So no matter how you see Niccolo Machiavelli, know that he was complicated, that he was a man of two minds, or maybe a man of one mind who was taken a little too seriously when he didn't really mean it. It's hard to argue that Discourses is sarcastic because it was written later, and as I said, it's longer, more well thought out work. So no matter what you think of Niccolo Machiavelli, remember there's lots of perspectives. He's complicated, like a lot of people were complicated. And that's an historical perspective on Niccolo Machiavelli.